Hi guys. So today we're going to be analyzing a game from the Sunway Sitges, and this is in the sixth round between um, Abdusattorov Nadirbek from Uzbekistan, who's a young talent, versus a strong Indian grandmaster. So the opening starts off as in English. It's a pretty dull line of the English because they trade off these pawns, and then it's just a symmetrical position until bishop b4, white castles, rook c1, c8. So still the position is pretty symmetrical, and then white plays knight h4. So white's trying to get the two bishops, and black has to give it up. Queen b3. And then here, black plays knight h5, which is, I found that it was unnecessary because after bishop e5, black can't take the bishop unless he goes f6. So this would force either bishop takes h5 or bishop g3, and then black would take. So in both cases, black gets the bishop back. But I think after bishop takes h5, white is slightly better. I think the engine will say it's equal, but I think it's easier to play as white because this pawn is kind of loose there. It's like unnecessarily weak. So I think white has a slight edge here, but it's definitely not anything serious. But after bishop e5, black didn't play f6, so he just went back. So definitely knight h5 was unnecessary just because he didn't follow through with f6. He can't take on e5 here because then white's going to take, and then black has to capture on c3. Otherwise, if he moves the bishop back, then white wins the knight. So like white's kind of attacking two pieces here. He's attacking the bishop and he's threatening g4. So black has to take. White's going to take with the pawn, and the threat is g4. f5 stops g4, but then c4. And this position is very bad for black because after d takes, white's going to take with the bishop. Black's going to lose the e6 pawn. And if black doesn't take, then white is just going to follow through with rook d1. And then the d5 pawn is going to fall. And through all this, the b7 pawn is also hanging, so not good for black. So he went back with knight f6, and now white plays an interesting move, knight b5. And he's kind of setting up some tactical opportunities here because his rook can actually sacrifice itself for the knight, and then black's bishop would be hanging. So there's some tactics there. So here black should have just went back with bishop e7, and then his bishop wouldn't be loose on b4 anymore. So this was the best move for black. Instead he played knight e4, and here white had to calculate. I'm sure white had to calculate a lot in thinking about rook takes e6 because that's the critical move. And then after rook takes c6, the critical reply would be b takes, which would attack the knight. Because if black simply recaptures with the rook, then white's just going to take the bishop. And then in doing that, white won 2 minor pieces for a rook, which is a significant win. So white calculated this, which happened in the game. And knight takes a7 is correct as well, because it captures a pawn while attacking the rook. So here, white is down 1 point, but he is attacking 2 pieces. So black continues with queen a5. Another option was rook c7, which would give back the exchange. And then after the liquidation, white would be a pawn up. So he would continue with a4, queen a3, and b4. And here white's already better because he just has an extra pawn. This is black's best response to prevent b4. But like white's definitely just better here, just because of that extra pawn he can push for the win. So black decided to go for the critical line, which is queen a5. If he moves the rook somewhere else, he's just going to drop c6. And here he's lost as well because the bishop's also fallen. So queen a5 and knight takes e8. If black just recaptures, then he's just down a point again. White could deal with this knight d2 threat just by like moving the rook, or simply playing a3, because if knight d2, then queen a3 4. So after the bishop moves, then he could play like rook d1 something. So black first plays knight d2 before he recaptures on c8. Queen d3. Queen d3 is the best because then he can follow with queen a6, which was his idea, white's idea. Queen d3, knight takes f1. Right, black wants to take the rook instead of the knight. It's more material. And now if white takes the knight, then black's just going to take white's knight. So white plays queen a6 instead. And this basically forces a trade of queens, because if black plays something like queen d8, then white will continue with knight a7. And after knight d2, white's going to take on c6, and then also pick up the bishop. So this basically forces a trade of queens, which is actually good for white because he has these this outside pass pawn, or these connected pass pawns, which are going to be very powerful or very strong in the endgame. So black has a couple of options here. He can play knight d2 first, but this also loses because of knight e7 check. And the bishop can't take this because the queen falls. So after the king moves, then white wins the bishop. The bishop is trapped here. So that's no good. And black has to trade queens. He plays f6 first, bishop b8, knight d2. And here white gets the pawns rolling. a3, b4, bishop d8, a4. And the problem with black's position is that his bishop is bad here. It can't get to this diagonal because of the knight. And if it can't get to that diagonal, it can't pressure b4. So b4 is not actually a weakness. And The c6 pawn is also weak here. It can be very easily attacked with like bishop b7. As you'll see, it's going to be vulnerable to knight e7. And the third problem for black is this knight here. So let me just unhighlight all these. The knight here it doesn't do much. It should be back. It would be better up here to help kind of block the pawns. But even here, it can't like attack white's pawns from behind. If it was on c2, it'd be attacking b4, but even then white can protect the b4 pawn if that ever occurs. So rook f7, black's trying to generate some counterplay. a5, bishop c7. White doesn't want to trade because he knows that black's bishop is not as good as his own. And white's dark squared bishop is actually very useful on c5 because it controls e7, protects b4, and then helps support the a pawn. So knight e4 is what black played, but it's actually the losing mistake. The only move for black to stay in the game was bishop d6. And it's taking advantage of the fact that white's knight is kind of overloaded. So it has to protect d6 while also protecting a7. And if white trades, then black is fine. Like trades are good for black because he's defending. So this is a possible line. Even though black sacrificed actually 2 pawns, he's going to get 1 back, and he's going to be able to defend this. He's going to get his rook behind and then defend the endgame. So another option for white is to trade the dark squared bishops. But here, black also should be fine. Another option that white could play is just to not trade, bishop d3. And this sets up a trap kind of. If black takes the b4 pawn, then white's winning with a6 after bishop b6, a7. But black can just play rook c7. And this forces the trade of bishops. And after a6, threatening knight c8, black can just deal with it by playing rook a8. So knight e4 is a mistake. And now after f3, knight d6, bishop c5, black's knight is just wandering around, but it's not doing anything useful really. Because if it trades on c8, then white's going to follow through with a6. And he's also threatening bishop takes e6. So not good for black. This is losing. Falls through with knight c4. But after a knight e7 check, he picks up the c6 pawn. After the c6 pawn falls, he just needs to coordinate his pieces properly to finally push the a pawn. And after a6, black resigned because of a7. So really nice game by the Uzbek young talent. I'm sure he calculated this exchange sacrifice all the way up until I'm sure both players saw this knight d2 opportunity. Otherwise, black would just be down a pawn. And then I'm sure he saw queen a6 as well. And he evaluated that the forced endgame would have good winning chances for him. Even though that he's actually down a point in terms of material, he has that outside pass pawn. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the analysis of this game. Happy holidays.